What is going on, gunfighters? Welcome back to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting the right way with Judeo-Christian values and real-world first-hand experience. Today, let's get nerdy again. Better know a cartridge. Perhaps my favorite Magnum, the 264 Winchester. Before we get into the topic, I'm going to plug in the bio. Before that, let me throw this out there. If you're listening on iTunes and you listen to more than one of these, scroll down, hit some stars, and write a quick review. Quick, free, easy way to support the show. With that, plug in the bio, and hopefully see you on the other side into the main body of the topic. Who am I? A question we should all ask ourselves. I am, first and foremost, a servant of God, made in His very own image, a follower of Jesus Christ, a simple man called by God to the Great Commission to share the good news of Jesus Christ. Next, a little bit about my background and what God has allowed me to do and blessed me to do in life. Grew up what most would consider very poor in the backwoods of the southeastern and mid-Atlantic United States, hunting and fishing. Joined the Marine Corps at 17. Did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. So a decorated Marine Corps combat veteran. Infantry assaultman. After the combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. I also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also a veteran of law enforcement. I served with LAPD. I was a sworn peace officer, a cop for LAPD. I worked regular patrol assignments and more specialized assignments. One of those more specialized assignments was warrant service, fugitive recovery. Also had some other law enforcement roles. I am an FBI certified firearms instructor and been certified by another 3-letter government agency in a lot of firearms and training things. I've also been a private contractor, worked in the private sector, pertaining to tactics and gunfighting and protecting America from enemies foreign and domestic. I served as the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters in a large metropolitan area. That was our primary mission, to stop active shooters, which sadly are a thing in America today. I've also been blessed to do quite a bit of competition shooting. Started my first formal competitions even before joining the Marine Corps at 17. I had won more shooting competitions than I can remember. I have competed in all manner of disciplines in shooting. I've been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion, West Coast regional champion. Like I said, been blessed to win more shooting competitions than I can remember. Mentioned hunting. I've hunted to put meat on the table starting when I was a child. I've also been a professional big game hunter and guide, hunting and slaying all manner of beast. And I don't apologize for that. Humbled to be the host of 3 podcasts. Simple Man Sermons, Alpha Male Podcast, and Gunfighter Life. Obviously, as things not mentioned, I've been blessed to do many other things. But, again, first and foremost, I'm a servant of God, a believer and follower of the Bible, the Word, Jesus Christ. And I don't apologize for that. With that, let's transition into today's topic. I'm going to start the main topic here by not actually talking about the cartridge we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the 6.5 in general. The 6.5, it took a long time for Americans to really love and embrace the 6.5, a lot longer than it should have. One of my favorite cartridges from days of yore, hunting from days gone by, is the 6.5 by 55 Swede. It is awesome. It also came out in the 1800s, and if you look at it on paper, it's ballistically almost identical to the 6.5 Creedmoor, which I also like because you can't like one and not the other, really. But it came out over 100 years later. It took a long time for us to embrace the 6.5, and I don't know why. It has a lot of merit. The 6.5 Creedmoor didn't come out of a vacuum. It wasn't the first 6.5 in that class. We just talked about the 6.5 by 55 that came out in the 1890s. There was also the 260 Remington, which I always thought was a great and should be more popular round. A fantastic balance of shootability and big game stopping power. But what happens if you throw a little bit of nitrous in there? What happens if you pump up the juice on a 6.5? That didn't start with the 6.5 PRC that just came out a year or two ago, or maybe 3 years ago now. It's a hot new cartridge. That didn't start with the 6.5 PRC. The 264 Winchester did it way back in the day, as they say. Back in the 50s. Back before we went to the moon. Back when kids were dreaming about rocket ships that could go into outer space. Back when Americans made things out of wood and metal and cars had chrome and were baby blue. Way back in those days, somebody juiced up a 6.5. Enter the 264 Winchester Magnum. I'm not a big fan of Magnums in general, but if I had to pick a favorite rifle Magnum, I would leave out the 357. That's probably my favorite Magnum. But my favorite rifle Magnum, with that caveat, it would probably be the 264 Winchester Magnum. Give credit where credit is due. I'm going to read from my old trusty Hornady reloading manual that I often quote from. Belted hot and powerful. That's how this cartridge talk starts out here on the 264 Winchester Magnum. You got to like that. Belted, hot, and powerful. The 264 Winchester Magnum is one of a series of belted magnums the firm announced beginning with the 4.58 Winchester introduced in 1958 and billed then as the ultimate in high-velocity flat trajectory hunting cartridges. The 264 became fairly popular for plains and mountain hunting. In use on varmints, the 264 can turn in spectacular results when it drives a 95 grain VMAX up to 3,500 feet a second. And it goes on, but that's where I'm going to stop. For somebody that really likes hunting with the 243 Winchester and have taken who knows how much game with a 243 Winchester, I like driving the 85 to 100 grain bullets. The fact that this cartridge can drive a 100 grain bullet in this manual, and this is not even like an off the charts load, this is a published load. And again, the Hornady manual is good, but it tends to play things pretty conservative. And it says you can push a 100 grain bullet at 3,500 feet a second with a lot of different powders. That is a screaming round. Probably more common for your large game for a lot of people are going to be your 129s to your 140 grains. It's launching a 129 grain projectile at 3,200 feet a second. So that's probably the load I would go with. You're not giving up a ton of velocity. It's a 129 grain bullet. You got good sectional densities there, and especially with that 6.5 caliber, and you're still launching it at 3,200 feet a second. I mean, that is a rocket ship from the 50s. 140 grains are getting launched out at 3,000 feet a second. So this begs the question, how does this compare with the 6.5 PRC? So my apologies on this. I can't compare apples to apples because actually my reloading manual is so old it doesn't have the 6.5 PRC. I've had this old girl a long time. So I had to look up on the Ogden website. I probably would have started there with the 264 Winchester, but I'm not perfect. So here we are. I'm just being honest here. Let's start on the Ogden website. You're looking at the 129 grain at 31, just over 3,100, 3,116 feet per second on 129 grain. And these are going to be hand loads, and I just picked some of the most popular powders. And bumping up to the first load I see on here, and I'm not going to give specific load data, but this one is 140 grain at 2902. Well, wait a second. We just looked at the Hornady manual, which again I think tends to be pretty conservative, and it's launching 140s at 3,000 and 129s at 32. That can't be right. This old cartridge from the 50s. This cartridge, it came out when a 1957 Chevy was a year old, is hotter than the hot new 6.5 PRC. Yeah, it is. Why? That begs the question, why does the 6.5 PRC exist? Well, I'm going to tell you something you might not like if you like the 6.5 PRC, and it's probably a fine cartridge. I don't own one. To be fair, I don't own a 264 Winchester either. Marketing. Marketing to make you think that this is some new idea to push the 6.5 fast. But again, this came out in 1958. And it's hotter. It has better, you quantify better by more powerful ballistics than the 6.5 PRC. Now, the 6.5 PRC, to be fair, is not a belted case, which you may or may not care about. Some people like belted cases, some don't. It may not require a magnum length action, which you may or may not care about. But the main point is, don't get bamboozled by marketing companies that think this is some new hot thing that if you have it, you're going to have the advantage over other hunters because you have the cool hot new cartridge. When it's not, it's less powerful than a cartridge that came out in the 1950s. And I'm not telling you that 6.5 PRC is a bad cartridge. If I like the 264, obviously I like the 6.5 PRC. They're both fine cartridges. But it's not new. That's just marketing hype. And to be fair, I'm sure there was plenty of marketing hype in Field and Stream and Outdoor Life magazine back when this thing came out about how it was going to be a game changer and all that. But again, nothing new under the sun, as we read in Ecclesiastes. So, I said this might be my favorite Magnum rifle cartridge. Why is that? Because you get true Magnum level performance, and if the laws of physics apply here, which I don't see why they wouldn't, you're not going to get a ton of recoil because one of the main factors, disproportionately so, in my opinion, for recoil is projectile weight. And you don't have to launch heavy projectiles to be able to take large game with this cartridge. Again, I said I routinely hunt with a 243. That's one of my go-to cartridges. I also routinely hunt, or have hunted as a professional big game hunter and guide, with a 6.5 Creedmoor. Because they both kill game. I think I've actually taken all my elk just coincidentally with a 243. If a 243 will do it, a 264 Win Mag will certainly do it. I looked at that and I'm kind of intrigued. Having one of those with a 100 grain bullet at 3,500 feet a second. Again, I'm not one that likes to hunt. Maybe not again. Maybe this is the first time you've heard this podcast. I'm not as much into the science of shooting as I like the art of shooting. And I like point blank shooting. I like spot and stalk hunting. I haven't looked up the point blank distance of a 100 grain bullet whizzing out of there at 3,500 feet a second with a, let's call it 200, 250 yard zero. But I got to imagine it's substantial. That is awesome for a spot and stalk hunter on the plains of Idaho, on the rolling hills, hunting pronghorn, and even stepping up to elk with that 140 grain bullet would be just fine. And again, these bullets are not prohibitively heavy, so I don't imagine the recoil is going to be crazy. And it's going to be more than a 6.5 Creedmoor, to be fair, for sure. It's much more powerful and a similar weight bullet. But I don't think it's going to be 300 Win Mag heavy recoil. And I don't just want to shoot the rifle, I want to train with it. I want to practice with it. I want to snap shoot with it. I want to get in a good slung up position and rest it off a backpack or a log and practice shooting because I've never hunted an animal off a bench, nor do I plan to. And I think this cartridge would do everything I wanted it to with less recoil than a 300 Win Mag. So why not? Arguably, it would do it everything I wanted it to and better than a 7mm Remington Magnum. Would probably be my next runner-up for my favorite Magnum rifle cartridge. Now we touched on it briefly, but a really cool application for this, pronghorn antelope hunting with a 100-grain bullet. That would be an understatement to say a deadly combination. That 129 to 140 grain range for your mule deer, for your elk, the right bullet construction, that's the caveat. I'm not going to go shoot these with, target bullets, but a good bonded game bullet, because you're driving these things at high velocities. You got to make sure they hold some integrity and stay together. But for that, if with the right bullet selection, that's a sledgehammer. Now there is a such thing as the 6.5 Remington Magnum. I'm not really going to talk about that one other than to say it exists. There's also the 6.5 300 Weatherby, which is also a really cool cartridge, which I'm not going to talk about in this episode other than to say that it exists, because I would like to do one day an entire episode on the 6.5 300 Weatherby. Anyway, with that, guys, I do these cartridge talks for you guys. Hopefully you find them intriguing. Oddly enough, on some platforms, they are my highest viewed content, which kind of blows me away because they're pretty obscure cartridges. But that said, if you would like me to talk about a certain cartridge I haven't talked about yet, let me know what it is. The easiest way to contact me, goodshepherdtraining.com. Go to goodshepherdtraining.com. There's a contact me link on there. Say, hey, I'd like for you to talk about the 35 Remington Magnum. I'm not promising you I'll do it, but I'm looking for ideas to do episodes. You guys like these cartridge talks, and I'll continue to do them. If you want me to talk about the 6mm Remington, which I think is a pretty good cartridge, reach out and let me know. goodshepherdtraining.com. And if you want to support the podcast, there'll be a Patreon link on there. With that, tactical tip of the day. This obviously is primarily a hunting cartridge. I don't know of any tactical guys running around with 264 Win Mags, although that would be pretty awesome. Let's talk about a hunting tip. Toilet paper. And not for the reason you might be thinking. Because a real man, you can go in the woods, it's not a big deal. But having some toilet paper on you as a hunter is a good idea for following a blood trail. Especially if it's around dark. Tear off a square and drop it the last place you saw blood, and the last place you saw blood, and the last place you saw blood. A little pro tip there, you can even drop it on the blood to make sure that it is blood, because a lot of times in the fall, leaves start to turn red. Instead of reaching down and playing with it with your finger or whatever, just drop a piece of toilet paper on it. It should be pretty clear whether it's blood or not, or just a red leaf. And again, when you look back, should be pretty clear to get a direction of travel, easier than it would be without it. If for some reason it gets too dark or you have to leave and come back later, it makes it that much easier to find that blood trail. So a little bit of toilet paper. If you have to, you have it for traditional use. To give credit where credit is due on that, I think I learned that from an old episode of Jack Spirko's Survival Podcast. It is a good tip, and it's just a good, easy thing to have in your kit. The easy ways to do that, the MRE toilet paper, if you're not familiar with it, you weren't in the military. That is better than regular toilet paper, it certainly isn't. It's probably far worse, but they pack a lot of it in a little tiny space. So it comes already pre-rolled up, super tiny. You need that, but if you can save some or find some at a store or whatever, keep that on you. Multifunctional piece of kit right there. You'll be super tactical. Way more tactical when you go to the bathroom with MRE toilet paper. Yeah, just regular Walmart toilet paper. Come on. Here's another pro tip. It made me think of this when I was thinking about the last tip. Cattails. Likely they grow somewhere where you hunt or around where you live. Cattails, if you don't know, are edible, but that's not a tactical tip of the day. You probably remember when you were a kid taking them and grinding them up in your hands and throwing them in the air and they float all over the place. You know what that's great for? Reading the wind. Having one of those, a few pieces of it just in one of your pockets you don't really use for anything else that you can take out, especially if you're a spot and stalk hunter. Having those that you can take out and let float in the wind to know which way the wind's going. Free, easy pro tip for you right there. And with that, something a little bit more substantial and more helpful in life, hopefully, the tactical verse of the day. 2 Corinthians While we do not look at the things which are seen, but the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal. Remember that in life. As much as it's cool to talk about guns and things like that, and gear and kit, and this thing's faster than that thing, remember what's really important. One day, unless Jesus comes back in our lifetime, you're going to die. And all the stuff you have, it's not going with you. So don't spend all your time thinking about that. Make sure God stays number one in your life. Don't put him in a box. Don't compartmentalize him. Don't leave him at church on Sunday. Don't have him just as part of your prayer when you eat dinner. It's good to pray when you eat dinner. God should be in every aspect of your life. Say a prayer when you go hunting. Say a prayer when you wake up in the morning. Give thanks that you take a breath. Remember what's really important in life. And it's not that one cartridge is 150 feet a second faster than another. Your days on this earth are a passing shadow. So have a right perspective. With that, men, thanks for listening and have a blessed day.